Should you make women chase you? If so, how? Well, the answer depends on where you're at in your journey towards finding the right girlfriend, life partner, or wife, or simply creating the right dating and social life for yourself. Most men chase women. Most men exhibit one of the following behaviors that destroys their success with women. The first one is simply not accepting a no. The most obvious manifestation of chasing women is she's not interested in you and she communicates that to you by either not responding, or it's an outright, hey, I think we're better off as friends, I'm not ready for a relationship. Those are all forms of a no, and you simply don't accept that. And then you go after her, you keep chasing her. That is the definition of creepy, and you have to stop that shit instantaneously because you're not respecting her space. You should always immediately respect the no. One, because you gotta do that, and that's what a kind and normal, respectful man would do. And second of all, not to waste your time, because there's an opportunity cost associated with you investing into chasing her as opposed to creating more options for yourself. So that's the most obvious manifestation. But chasing her does not just relate to you going after her after she's given you a no. Chasing her can also manifest itself in very subtle verbal as well as non-verbal behaviors on the date. So let's say you've probably had that. You're on a date with a really attractive woman and you feel like you're emotionally reaching for her. You crave her approval, you crave her validation, and that is not the same thing as desire. You can absolutely desire her, you can feel a want. A want is perfectly fine, there's a million things we want. But you don't need her. The second it becomes a problem is when it turns into neediness and you're reaching for approval. Since you're not able to approve of the value of your spoken word, since you're not able to validate your own existence as a man in that moment, since you're not grounded enough in your own sense of identity, since you're not able to provide yourself with certainty, you're using her as a source of approval. You're using her as a source of validation. You're using her as a source of certainty. And men do that in the initial dating stages as well as later on in the relationship. And I can tell you that there is very few bigger turnoffs for women. Obviously there's a variety, but there's very few bigger turnoffs for women than you using her as a source of certainty. She wants to use you as a source of certainty. You're the man. You're supposed to provide certainty. What does the leader do? He brings certainty to a situation. There's an uncertain situation, and a date is a very playfully uncertain situation, and you bring the certainty to the situation. That is your task as a man. And the more you're emotionally reaching, the more you're craving her approval and her validation, the more that's going to manifest in your attitude and your verbal and non-verbal communication towards her, and she's going to pick up on that. Women are very smart. They sense it. They can sense it. If you're using her as a source of approval, if you desperately need her to approve of the joke you made, the next thing you're about to say, what if she doesn't like what I have to say? What if I run out of things to say? And yes, there's techniques, many of which that I teach in depth in my coaching program that are amazing to never run out of things to say. So absolutely apply for a free initial consultation call. But at the same time, it is not so much about the exact spoken word. Yes, the right word and time can make a huge difference. You know that when it comes to texting. The one wrong line on a date, the one wrong thing via text can really mess it up. But it's much more so about you being grounded in your own sense of identity and not reaching emotionally. So that's one of the big things that men do, one of the big mistakes that men make. Another way within which men chase women is double texting. She doesn't respond for, let's say, 18, 24 hours, you immediately send her another text. You have to understand that if you've never met her for a date, then she's not obligated to respond to you within a certain period of time. At work, in business, you understand that it sometimes takes people time to respond to your emails. But all of a sudden, when it comes to women, you have all these expectations that she should respond within a given period of time. Now, obviously, if you've been on a couple of dates and you've created some intimacy between the two of you, and then it takes her a full day to respond and there's no good reason for it, that could be considered an orange flag, but not a problem in and of itself, because until you're actually in a relationship, you shouldn't have any of these expectations. One of the biggest mistakes that I see with clients who join the coaching program is they have all these expectations regarding women's behavior. You should have very few expectations towards her timing of responses, for example. And you know, like, this goes a little bit deeper than today. I want to stick with the subject matter at hand for now, but reduce your expectations a little bit. Now, that is not to say that you should lower your standards as to who you would consider for a long-term relationship. You should still have very high standards, but in the initial stages, over the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth date, have very low expectations regarding her behavior and just be playful and fun and non-needy. Give yourself validation, give yourself the approval you need, give yourself the certainty that even if she should completely stop responding, your happiness does not depend on this one particular individual. If you do that, you'll be much more grounded and confident on the date. Next one, leaning forward. If you're talking to her in a bar or nightclub and it's very difficult to hear her, you know when you're like leaning in a lot? That can be highly unattractive. Now, some men take that to an extreme where they believe you can never ever lean forward at all anymore. That's not true. Obviously, sometimes you can lean forward, and if the rest of your communication is absolutely on point, it's fine. But if you're leaning forward, you're sacrificing your frame. Quite literally speaking, not the frame that we usually refer to as the underlying assumptions that give a particular conversation its meanings, you know, the assumptions and beliefs, but actually your frame. And the frame is something that's talked about in bachata and salsa quite a bit. You're not supposed to ever sacrifice your frame. And the same thing here. Don't sacrifice your frame. Don't lean forward all the time. Don't never do it either. It's not like you have to be this rigid person. Remember, it's not so much the activity, but the inner attitude, the inner belief that it's coming from. If you say, I can lean forward, I don't have to do that, because your confidence is already through the roof, then that's fine. Mindset is going to trump all of that. But that being said, if you lean forward all the time, if you don't have a strong, solid frame, if your body language is completely off, that's a form of chasing her. That's quite a literal manifestation thereof. Another way within which men chase women is they agree too much. And I'm not saying that you can't agree with women, but that you have to be this disagreeable alpha male all the time. Not at all. I'm not saying that. That'd be very silly to say. Obviously, you want to have common ground because you want to build rapport, in other words, trust, by having things in common, by agreeing. But so many of you agree even when you don't feel like agreeing, just to move things forward in an intimate way. And there's very few things that are a bigger turnoff for women than you having this approval-seeking behavior and just agreeing way too much. Doing the opposite is way more effective, but we're going to get to that in a second. Giving her too many compliments. Some of you don't give women any compliments, and compliments are one of a 1,000 ways to build a man-to-woman connection. So you should absolutely use compliments. But if you use too many, again, it can seem like you're chasing her too hard. You want her just a little bit too much. Next, you're too filtered in your own expression. Men don't even realize that chasing her also means not being free in your own expression. If you can't even carefreely express your honest thoughts, feelings, and opinions, how are you ever supposed to get her excited about you? She wants you to have controversial opinions. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to make stuff up just to be polarizing for the sake of polarizing. But if you were to implement more radical honesty in your communication with women, your results would skyrocket. Really, for sure. It makes a huge difference. Now, radical honesty always has to be paired with effectiveness and calibration. You can't just walk up to a random lady at Starbucks and tell her, hey, you're super beautiful, I'd like to have sex with you tonight. That would be very honest, but not calibrated. So you understand that honesty always has to be paired with calibratedness and a degree of, simply paying attention to the best practices of building attraction, the psychology of men-to-women interaction. So you do have to have an understanding of that. Next one, you feel like you're walking on eggshells around her. I had that with my ex-wife quite a bit. I was fairly frequently worried about her negative emotional reactions. She's not a bad person at all. I'm not saying anything bad about her. It's just there was an inherent lack of compatibility in the relationship that made things go downhill, and I wasn't grounded in my masculinity. There was a lot of things that were off in terms of my communication and the compatibility. But I remember that when I started out into this dating journey in the beginning, I constantly felt like I was walking on eggshells around women even on the date. I was very careful with what I was saying because I didn't want her to lose interest. What if she's not going to approve of this joke? What if she doesn't think this is funny? And all of this really pushed them away until I realized, well, this is not the way to go. And that's why, well, before we get into how to make women chase and when that's actually appropriate advice and when it isn't, one more thing. Okay, just there's many more ways here. Okay, there's many more ways within which men chase women. But this is exactly why it's brilliant advice for men in the beginning to simply make women chase. To flip the script, so to speak. to be the one who's desired, to let her crave you, to let her compete for you, to let her invest in the relationship or even in the ongoing dating process with you, as opposed to you being the one who constantly runs after her all the time. And it absolutely works in the beginning. But there's different paradigms of evolution. This is a really useful paradigm for people in the early journey to adopt. But at some point, you should go from behavior to being. You should move from techniques, and there's a million techniques. There's push, pull, disqualification, teasing. There's a million different ways within which you can, build that, flip the script or make her chase, get her to react to you a bit more emotionally. But the problem is, this can go into the area of pickup and just trying to get the wrong women interested in you. Remember, this is never my aim. My aim is never for you to get the wrong women interested in you. This is always about getting the right type of women excited about you. Because, as we talked about in the video a couple of days ago, that there's always two groups of people. Women that you have compatibility with and women that you don't have compatibility with. And both can get interested in you and both can lose interest in you if you communicate well. But it doesn't serve you or them to get the wrong type of women interested in you, because it's only going to last a short period of time. Even if you're able to establish a degree of intimacy with a woman for a short period of time, she's going to lose interest in you at some point. Once you finally communicate your personality authentically and effectively, once you communicate what you actually believe and you realize, wow, our values really aren't in common and my personality simply isn't in sync with hers. So that's absolutely something to keep in mind. So at some point you want to transcend the behavioral, the technique, the structural level, which is super useful and important for beginners in the beginning, to a being component, where you rest in yourself so much that it almost doesn't matter what she does and that it almost doesn't matter who you're communicating with. You're doing all the right things automatically. It's become intuitive. It's become an unconscious competence. But this is what the mainstream gets wrong. The mainstream always tells you, just be yourself and everything's going to be fine. No, it won't, because just being yourself, in other words, being intuitive, in other words, accessing an unconscious competence, can only be done if the competence has been created consciously beforehand. You have to move through unconscious incompetence. In other words, you have blind spots, things you don't even know that you're doing wrong right now, things you're not even aware of that are messing up your results. Okay, we all have them in certain areas in our life. Then it becomes a conscious incompetence. I know I suck at this. Then you work on the skill set and it becomes a conscious competence. Okay, so I'm doing this. This is what I'm doing to not be too interested in her on the date, or I can be interested, but to not be too needy on the date. I'm consciously doing the right things. And at some point, the last stage is unconscious competence. You're intuitively, automatically doing the right things. In other words, you're being yourself. But you can't just jump to that. You cannot just intuitively access a competence you never consciously created beforehand in the first place. Do you understand? That's why you have to go through that. You have to go through a process of getting out there, getting experience. And by the way, this is also why you should master online dating as well as real life interactions, because they will prepare you for the relationship you'll have with your wife, girlfriend, or life partner. Because if you don't go through this, and you do something like matchmaking, for example, then you're being presented a couple of options, but you've never had to create those options for yourself. And you will always, one, live in fear that these options will dry out. And also, you will have never learned how to navigate a variety of different people, and you will have never strengthened that groundedness. You will have never created that sense of resting as the one who knows, as Jack Kornfield called it, or I believe that's what it's called in Buddhism. When you meditate, you rest within yourself as the one who knows. And if you never create that for yourself, the probability that the relationship you'll enter into with a woman that you might even have a high degree of compatibility with will succeed is a lot lower. So it's super important to move to first go and start doing the right things, then to move into an area where it's about who you are, it's your being, and that's super useful advice. But not if you're in the beginning journey. First, you have to consciously establish a skill set, and then at some point, you want to leave all that behind. Do you think that me and Fernanda are sitting there at the dinner table and I'm like, okay, 27% of compliments, disqualification, teasing, push-pull, future projection, blah, blah, blah. None of that. I'm just, me. Guess what? I'm just being myself. But I've also gotten a shit ton of experience, and if I would have had a mentor or coach, I could have cut down my learning curve. I actually did have a mentor, right? But if I would have had he wasn't a coach. So I got amazing advice from the person, and I'm super grateful for eternity. But I've never gone through a structured formal coaching program, which is something that you might want to consider doing, because it'll cut your learning curve in time. it'll cut your learning curve in half. Regardless of that, I want you to take the following things away from this. Please eliminate the following behaviors. 1, not accepting a no. Always accept a no. Immediately. Immediately. And just move on and talk to other women. Be that on a night out. Okay, next approach. Next approach. Be that online. Moving on. Now, that does not mean that you should prematurely exit those conversations. Just because she may not immediately love you, if she's talking to you, a lot of men, they disqualify themselves. They reject themselves way too quickly. So that doesn't mean that either. Be super respectful, but also just see, is she genuinely interested in me or not? Read her signals. I got a video for that here on this YouTube channel. Next one, emotionally reaching. Validate yourself. This goes way deeper. This could be a 4-hour lecture in and of itself, but stop emotionally reaching. Center yourself. And meditation is a powerful tool. Surrounding yourself with high quality men is a powerful tool. Getting coaches and mentors is a powerful tool. Ground yourself. Validate your own word. Approve of your own spoken words. Understand that what you say has value, because you are a high value man. Doesn't mean you shouldn't work on yourself, doesn't mean I shouldn't work on myself either. We all got to do that. But for God's sake, if you can't even draw certainty from within, Tony Robbins talks about a model that we all have 6 different human needs, and the number 1 being certainty. You need to be able to create that for yourself, because that's what a leader does. There are uncertain situations in life, and she wants you to bring certainty out of nothingness. You create that certainty out of nothingness. There can be a challenge in your life, but you say, what can I focus on? What can I not? What can I control? What can't I control? And then you focus on what you can control, and you create certainty within yourself immediately. That's something you have to be able to do. Next, double texting. Stop that. If she doesn't respond, follow up 3 or 4 days later, either with a question mark if your previous text was a question, or with another unrelated statement if it was just a statement, or most likely if you've been texting way too much, simply go for a soft close inviter for a date. Stop leaning forward too much. Hold your frame. Don't be stiff and rigid, but have a masculine frame. Next, stop agreeing too much. Agree with her when you genuinely feel like agreeing, and tell her, hey, this is amazing. Actually, that's awesome. Really cool opinion. Great. Nice. Awesome. Really, can you give her validation for agreeing with you almost? And also agree with her, but don't agree when you don't feel like agreeing. Don't fucking lie, in other words. Be more radically honest. Don't give her too many compliments. Do use them, but not too many. Next one, stop walking on eggshells around her. If you feel like, I don't know what I'm doing, well, it may be because you're lacking a competence. I can help you with that if you want to. Or simply because you don't have enough high quality male friends, or because you haven't gotten enough experience yet. But ground yourself in your own sense of identity. Understand, I don't need this person, right? Before the date, you should put work into studying and understand what is it that I really need to do, and to really improve your communication skills. So you want to improve your communication skills, absolutely. But the only thing that you got to tell yourself when you're on the date is the following. The only affirmation you should have when you're on the date is you shouldn't be caught in your head thinking about techniques and strategies, blah, communication, none of that. The only thing you have to affirm to yourself when you're on the date is the following. If it's meant to be, there's nothing in the world I can do to fuck this up. And if it's not meant to be, there's nothing in the world I can do to make it work. That being said, never do anything she doesn't want to do. That doesn't mean that okay, she's into me and then you can just blindly go for the kiss. No, you got to read her signals. That's important. And you should kiss her at the end of the first date. In other words, you should offer her the kiss very slowly so she can decide whether to opt in or opt out. But when she's standing or sitting in front of you, the only thing you have to tell yourself is, if this is meant to be, there's nothing in the world I can do to fuck this up. And if it's not meant to be, there's nothing in the world I can do to make it right. And then, once you've gone through the development of a conscious competence, you want to shift into being. You just want to let go. That's a very important point, because if you're on the date and you're tense and you're trying to control everything and everything has to be perfect, that doesn't help either. So you just relax and you ground yourself in your own sense of identity and who you are as a man. You understand, well, she's probably going to be interested in me because there's so much that's so exciting about me. You understand the value that you can bring to the relationship and you're simply present. Jack Kornfield is, in my opinion, one of the best meditation teachers out there. Go check out some of his guided meditations. If you meditate, and it's not necessary, you don't have to meditate at all to be great with women. You really don't, really. There's a million different tools. It's just a tool that may work for you or it may not. For some it works brilliantly and for some it doesn't. But it can help with grounding yourself. And what happens with meditation is actually really interesting on a final note is this emotional reaching stops. It doesn't stop completely, but it can actually stop completely for a period of time because you sit with yourself. You're just resting and you validate your own existence. I don't know if it's figuratively or literally, but you're sitting there and you're so full of yourself in the best sense, because everything that appears just appears in consciousness, as an object in consciousness, sounds, feelings, emotions, thoughts, ooh, I want her, fear, insecurity. You just notice it all, but you don't associate with it. What we do as men, what we do as people, is we immediately associate and identify with all the thoughts and feelings and sensations that arise within us. But what meditation teaches you, you learn to sit in the middle of things and you just learn that it arises, that all emotions and thoughts have a halftime. And if you're just aware as the one who knows, sitting there, watching all of this, it can become a lot easier for you to just be playful, not just with the tests she gives you, the congruence test, the fun, playful mating dance, the dating process, but also what arises within you. Oh, there's nervousness. Oh, there's excitement. Oh, there's desire. Oh, there's a little bit of neediness. Ah, okay. There's neediness. Thank you for your opinion. Interesting. Oh, you really want her. Desire. Oh, thank you for your opinion. Ooh, self-doubt. Ah, thank you for your opinion. I'm going to take over now. Thank you very much. What impact would it have on your life to change your inner dialogue like that? Apply for a free initial consultation call if you want to. I sincerely wish you all the best.